What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here for PackersNews.com, live on Facebook late Monday afternoon. Hope everybody had a great President's Day, or is still continuing to have a great President's Day. I thought I'd jump on and see what's on your minds in lieu of any real breaking news today. Obviously, about a week to go yet before we hit the Combine there in Indianapolis. All quiet on the Packers front, so to speak, out of 1265 Lombardi, but that doesn't mean we don't have plenty to talk about. So thought I'd hop on and see what's on your minds. Hello from Dallas. Hello, David. How are you? Thanks for joining us. Dan from Milwaukee. Dan, my old buddy from North Carolina. How are you, Dan? Thanks for joining me, buddy. Chippewa Falls. Zach, thanks so much for joining us. Joan, good afternoon. Will we trade down in the draft? David, great first question. You know, as I've been saying, it's really hard to forecast how Brian Gutekunst will approach the draft. I tend to suspect he will, looking over the landscape of the roster and the holes they need to fill, I wouldn't be surprised if they traded down at any point, including in the first round. Now, I don't expect them to drop down too far, but the idea of picking up an extra selection and being able to kind of dip their toe into the talent pool an extra time or two has got to be enticing for a team that, you know, has a bunch of work to do, whether at tight end, whether at cornerback, whether at edge rusher, right tackle. They have a lot of needs. So you're gonna. History tells you the more chances that you get, more swings at the plate, so to speak, that you have to draft new talent, the better off you're going to be. But it all depends on their valuations of players as they fall to them, what they think grade-wise of the players that are available to them when they're on the clock, and you know, it always takes two to tango. So it's a long way of saying it's really hard to predict, but I have to think that Gutekunst will keep those options open. Nice haircut, thanks, Dan. Keep Clay, Donna. I don't suspect Clay Matthews is going anywhere. I do suspect that they will try to do something with his contract. Most likely, they'll try to extend it, thereby reducing his cap hit for 2018, which is significant. But I would be very, very surprised if they outright cut him. Even though I am aware that they would have no cap penalties for doing so. It doesn't cost them anything if they do end up cutting him. But like I said, I'd be very surprised if they went that route. People that say Nelson and Cobb need to go are out of their minds. I wouldn't say those people are out of their minds. I understand the impetus. When you look at their contracts, you look at the numbers attached to them, and then you look at the lack of production in certain spots, then I get why people would arrive at that conclusion. But I think it's a misinformed opinion. I think it's something that doesn't really take into account a lot of different factors. With Nelson, simply his connection to Rodgers and how productive it's been, even up through when Rodgers went down last year. He's still a touchdown machine, and you know, last I checked, putting points on the board is a big part of the game. And with Cobb, I've just went on a mini Twitter rant a couple minutes ago, showing plenty of tape of Cobb getting open, both with the ball going to him and not. People look at that contract and think, well, $10 million for a slot receiver, that money can be spent elsewhere, and probably could be spent elsewhere. My contention is, and I've been saying all offseason, you don't get better cutting good football players. You only hurt yourself. Yes, could you get that production elsewhere? Probably, but there's no guarantee that you will, especially with a guy like Randall Cobb, who does a lot of the dirty work, does a lot of things that no one else on the team does. Could Ty Montgomery step in and do a lot of what Cobb does? Maybe. But goodness knows, people talk about Cobb being injury prone. Ty Montgomery hasn't been able to make it through, you know, a month without getting nicked up. So getting rid of Cobb would be, I would call it misguided. I don't think people are out of their minds. I just think they're, like I said, making an uninformed opinion. Do we look at pass rushers? I don't think there's any doubt. I think the free agent crop will probably dry up quickly. We already saw a report today. DeMarcus Lawrence will get franchise tagged by the Cowboys. They'll look to extend him, and that's what I've been talking about as far as, you know, people looking at quote unquote available people in free agency. Those lists are going to dry up quick when the top guys end up getting franchise tagged, which opens tomorrow, the franchise tag window. But yes, I think the Packers have to look at a pass rusher both in free agency and especially in the draft. Kyle Fuller or Aaron Colvin? I actually like Colvin better as a player, Justin. I think both of them would help the Packers. I think we need to see if the Bears end up franchising Fuller. I know there was a report by CBS saying that he would be gone and not return to Chicago, but I believe that report, I mean, my hunch is that report is coming out of the players' camp. We'll see what the Bears have to say about that. They could very easily end up franchise tagging him, and he would be off the market. Draft an edge in the first and a corner like Oliver in the second. Definitely a possibility. I don't think any GM, or at least the best GMs, they try not to pigeonhole themselves like that. If you go into a draft saying we've got to get this position in each round, then you're setting yourself up to reach. And it's not saying that you're not going to get a good player. You probably will. But if the idea is to get the best collection of talent possible, while filling needs, then I think you don't want to limit yourself and you don't want to box yourself in. Now, it could very well be that the best player available at 14 is a pass rusher. And if the board falls that way, then yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But it doesn't mean that if they don't take a pass rusher in the first that they absolutely can't find one. They can. The margin for error gets tougher, but it doesn't mean, there's 6 more rounds to go. David, happy Monday. Thanks for joining. Chris, Talib over Butler. I would absolutely agree with that assessment. I think Talib's a better player. Obviously, with Talib, there's a lot of off-the-field baggage that comes with him and on the field when it comes to getting into fights. But I think he's a better player, and I think he would help the Packers more. That said, who knows what's going on with Butler with the benching in the Super Bowl. That story has still not come out. So the Packers would have to do their homework there. But I think absolutely Talib would be a better addition on the field. Now, as far as the off-field stuff, that's something that the Packers would have to explore. But, yeah, I think Talib would be a big help on the field. Will Ted Thompson be in the war room for the draft? That's a good question. I tend to think so, yes. Most of the time they have the personnel guys are all kind of in line up there. Obviously, Gutekunst will be sitting in the big chair, so to speak, and he'll be calling the shots. But I would tend to think, yeah, Ted will be in the war room while the draft is going on. That's just a guess. But that's something I'll ask Brian Gutekunst when we get to the Combine next week. He must be a McCarthy lover. No, Timothy, I'm not a McCarthy lover. I'm a McCarthy realist. It's easy to hate on the guy. It's easy to go overboard on the guy. I try and keep it centered and look at what actually happens on the field and all the components, not just the stupid play call components. Sam Shields. I know our Michael Cohen talked to him, and we had the interview with him up at PackersNews.com. I believe it's still on the homepage. I would be very surprised if the Packers went that route. He's one hit away from missing another entire season, and he's also one strike away, most likely, from being suspended for an entire season due to his marijuana arrests. So I would be very surprised if the Packers explored that avenue. Let's see what else we got. Kurt. Well, Kurt, just trying to keep it real, man. Raji for cornerback. Now you're talking, Mark. I like it. I like what you're saying there. I think Raji for every position, really. Tiffany, you have an awesome job. That is correct. I do. I do have an awesome job. Although, it gets tough as the year goes on during the season, being away every weekend. That part is tough. But the rest of it, it's pretty great. Is Jordy still worth his contract? That's a good question, Stephen. How much is that connection with Aaron Rodgers worth? I tend to think he's the one guy they will target for a restructure along with Clay Matthews. I don't think they'll approach Cobb. Now, maybe they will. I don't know. But I tend to think they'll look at Nelson, who has stated publicly he's open to a restructuring, and they'll try to reduce his cap hit. Now, is that going to happen? We can only wait and see. But to me, I think, is he worth it? Yeah, that's going to be a different answer from every human you ask. But for me, probably he's the one guy I would look to ask to restructure. I think it's a bit much to ask him, to the rest of the team, to look at that contract when, that he has definitely lost his step. He's lost his suddenness as an athlete. And what is the premium you put on his ability to get open when things break down, to read defenses the same way Rodgers does? I think you can get a little bit of kind of cap relief there. You try and go for it. Do we try to get a better punt kickoff returner? I think they do. I think Trevor Davis has clearly got the speed, but sitting around waiting for him all year to make a play, which he obviously finally did in Cleveland to help save that game. But along the way, you had to deal with so many bad decisions. The decision-making was very spotty throughout the season. And I know the coaches have defended him and said he's doing what he's told, etc. I think some of that is covering up some questionable decision-making on Davis's part. He hasn't shown much as a receiver. They drafted him in the hopes that he would be a deep threat with his speed, but every time they've tried to target him deep, he's shown very little nose for the football. Just hasn't looked to be a great deep threat. So if he's not great at going up and getting it deep or getting deep and being productive that way, and if he's not great as a punt returner or a kick returner, what exactly do you have there other than a body? And I think, yes, I think this is the offseason they have to look and see if they can upgrade at that position. What happened to Lindsley this year? Paul, he had a decent season and he got a contract extension. I don't think he was quite as good as he has been in the past, but he did play every single snap, the only player on the Packers to do so. And I still think he's one of the better young centers in the league. Was he as effective as he has been in the past? Maybe not, but I do think he was trying to compensate for a lot of kind of the mixing and matching that was going along the offensive line all season long. Don't forget, I mean, by week 6, they had played 6 different combinations along the offensive line. As the guy who is charged with helping call the protections and make sure that everyone's set protection-wise, he was compensating for a lot. There are a number of places you can look at on tape where he makes a call and the guard next to him either goes the wrong way or doesn't disengage to get to the second level, etc. Those are not his mistakes, but it makes him look bad. The one in particular that I kind of point to is in Dallas. There's a call, the second sack the Cowboys had that game. There's a call where Lindsley clearly tells them slide left. It's a slide protection left call. And the whole line does, except for Jari Evans, who either just didn't get the call or just kind of forgot the call. And he stands straight up and blocks straight up, and the rusher comes straight through and sacks Rodgers. And Lindsley hops up, and you can see he's so upset. I think he was dealing with that kind of thing all year long. And when that's happening, yeah, his play probably wasn't up to the level that it had been in years prior. But like I said, he's still immensely talented and still one of the better young centers in the game. What are the chances to make the playoffs with the new coaching staff? Ken, I think very good. We've got Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. You've got the plethora of weapons. The defense obviously needs to play its part. But with Rodgers, I mean, look, they went to 2 NFC Championship games in 3 years with a pretty porous defense. So the idea that, all of a sudden they're not contenders, I think is erroneous. I think as long as they've got Rodgers, McCarthy's offense, and the defense can just pull its weight, it doesn't even have to be dominant. Yeah, they're absolutely contenders. Could Ball and Gutekunst disagree on restructuring a player? Who wins? That is a phenomenal question, and I'm sorry I didn't get to catch the name there, but that's a fantastic question. I'll tell you what, who wins is who makes the better case to Mark Murphy. Murphy has now set that up. That's exactly what he has wanted. He's inserted himself into that process, where I tend to doubt that would happen, but you have to think eventually it will. The only answer is whoever makes the better case when they meet with Murphy. I tend to think they will, quote unquote, play nice and definitely are all rowing in the same direction, but, conflict seems inevitable. Let's see. Why would the Packers not try to get Jack Del Rio as defensive coordinator? Well, I think because they like Mike Pettin better. I think Packer fans are going to be pleasantly surprised with Pettin as a defensive coordinator. He's an excellent defensive mind. He's as good as Rex Ryan was when Rex Ryan was still good, but without the Rex Ryan bombast. Nick Nelson as punt returner. That would be fun to see. That would not be out of bounds. What is Hundley's current status? Cut him? No, I don't think they cut him. He still has 1 year left on his rookie deal. You bring him back, you bring in competition, clearly. Both I would bring in a veteran free agent and a draft pick. But I wouldn't cut him, at least not yet. He's cheap labor at this point. You know he knows the offense. You can run the offense. You can get through a game with him. You absolutely keep him around. Now, the hope is that you either find someone better or you find someone to compete with him to make him better. But cutting him now wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. Maybe down the road, maybe this summer, if they find something better. But right now, there's no need to. Aaron Colvin, thoughts? Eric, I talked about him a little bit before. I think he makes a lot of sense. I do think he'll have quite a little market around him when he hits free agency. And I hesitate to think that the Packers are going to get involved in any kind of bidding war. But I think he would help immensely. There's no doubt about that. Someone just asked what to do about Bulaga. We've talked about that quite a bit. There's zero doubt that he will have to start the year on the physically unable to perform list, which means he'll miss the first 6 weeks, which means they have to find someone to play right tackle. As for Bulaga, I think there's a very good possibility they cut him. I probably wouldn't, but I won't be surprised if the Packers do. He's it just hasn't been able to stay on the field outside of the 2016 season, which was I think the first time he's ever gone 16 games. It's just you can't count on him and his to be on the field, and you're paying him a whole lot of money. So you put that combination together, and it's hard to justify. But for myself, I would probably keep him around just because he's still one of the better right tackles when he is on the field. He's not going to count towards the 53 at the start for 6 weeks at the start of the year. So I would keep him there and see if you can find someone to play right tackle. And if you can't, he's got him coming back. But I think the hope is probably that they find their new right tackle in the draft this year. Jarvis Landry and cut Cobb? Absolutely not. Cobb is a better player than Landry. I know people have trouble believing that, but it's true, especially in the Packers offense. You don't cut a guy who has been excellent in your offense and continually gets open. And if you don't believe me, check my Twitter account because I just put up a bunch of clips of Cobb getting wide open. For a guy who has struggled with inconsistent play throughout his tenure in Miami, I think he's good. I don't think he's as good as Cobb. What do you predict or hope for the Packers' first-round pick? I don't really hope for anything. I'm interested to see who they pick. As far as who I predict, I think somebody like Harold Landry is a possibility. I think Jackson, the corner from Iowa, is a possibility. But let's get through the combine first and see how these guys test, because that goes a long way to filling out their scouting profile and kind of determining a pecking order, so to speak. Marcus Peters. Lewis, a lot of people asking about Peters because of the reports out there that the Chiefs will attempt to trade him, or possibly attempt to trade him. You got to think it's a possibility just because obviously Dorsey, Wolf, and Highsmith all have very clear connections with the Packers and with Gutekunst and his staff. It really depends on what the asking price is. I don't expect that Gutekunst would spend his first year in charge of the draft giving away a premium pick. But he's a good player, Peters. He's obviously a bit of a hothead, got some off-field stuff that they would have to deal with. But he would definitely improve the defense. There's no doubt about that. Aaron Lynch or D Ford as depth? I love Aaron Lynch, Alex. And I know a lot of people look at Lynch and think, oh, he's only productive when he plays against the Packers, which has kind of been true, but I like him as a player. I think he would definitely help. And that's the kind of guy who probably isn't going to break the bank. You're probably not going to hear his name on that first day of free agency where the stupid money's getting thrown around. But he's absolutely someone the Packers probably should look at as for, that second wave of free agency begins, as someone who could come in and help, as far as applying pressure at the quarterback. I think that would be a smart signing. Brian Cushing possibility. Corey, I would be absolutely shocked if they went after Brian Cushing. He's old. He's lost his step. He's been injured a bunch. He's been suspended a few times. Or I'm sorry, just once, I think. Going out and shelling out a bunch of money for that kind of player doesn't seem to be in the Packers' modus operandi. But as I keep saying, it's a new GM. So, all bets are off. It's a possibility. You can't dismiss it until you see how at least you get some kind of track record behind Gutekunst. But initially, I would think they probably would pass on that. How do we get a killer corner? Sherman at all possible? I think Sherman's a very, very outside possibility. I think Colvin would be probably a better pickup at this point in their respective careers. And there's always the draft. Don't forget, there can be talent found in lots of places that may not be obvious and may not be headline grabbing. Guys who are making headlines and stories that get written now in February, March, and April aren't always necessarily making the plays come December and January. What are you going to do with Crosby? I'm not going to do anything, James. What do you mean, the Packers? I think the Packers will probably keep Crosby. I saw an article out there talking about, someone was positing the idea that they could cut him to save cap room. I don't see that, but who knows? Maybe. I doubt it, though. What about A.J. McCarron as a backup? Scott, I think he'd be a decent backup. The problem is he just won his case to become a free agent. I don't think he won it so he could go back up someplace. I think he wants to start. That's not coming in Green Bay. I think he and his reps will look for a place where he can land and compete for a starting job. Plus, he's going to get paid. I don't think the Packers are ready to shell out a ton of money for a backup quarterback. What's going to happen first? Coach McCarthy extension or Roger big contract? Oh, Roger's big contract. I won't say no doubt, because there's every possibility the Packers don't reach an agreement with Rodgers before the season starts. But McCarthy will only get an extension if they win big this year. And I'm not saying they have to win the Super Bowl, but I think they have to go on a run. And, if they do that, then McCarthy will get an extension. But I tend to think Rodgers' deal will get done this summer, probably right before camp. Who is the best option at tight end? I think they got to look at both the draft and free agency. I've said often here, I think Austin Seferian-Jenkins makes a lot of sense. Trey Burton as well. I think those are the two guys they should target. Not a big fan of spending big money on Jimmy Graham just because he's pretty one-dimensional, even though that dimension would help open up the offense. I think that money can be better spent elsewhere. That's just me. I know a lot of people want Jimmy Graham, and I understand why. In the draft, I love Dallas Goedert. I think that guy could make a real difference on the Packers offense. But they definitely got to look at both the draft and free agency. I think, the cupboard is pretty bare at that position, and they need to kind of overhaul it. Do you see the Packers moving up in the draft? It's a possibility. We won't know until we see how Gutekunst operates. Dante Moncrief, I think, makes a lot of sense if they can get him at a decent number. He's a guy who's got speed that they certainly lack on the perimeter, and he would be a nice complement to what they already have. I tend to think he's going to get paid, though, and I don't see the Packers shelling out big money to a wide receiver in free agency. Last year for Big Mike, lots in media saying he's gone. Lots in media? What does that mean, lots in media? Lots in the national media who have no idea what they're talking about? Maybe. The simple fact is this. He got the one-year extension. He has more power now than he did before. He's got Aaron Rodgers coming back. He's been to 2 NFC Championship games in the last 3 years. Or he had been prior to this year and his quarterback getting hurt. If they go to another NFC Championship game, he'll get an extension. No doubt about it. Wow, Timothy, that's a lot of information there, buddy. Will Packers draft a dual... for what? What's up with Janis? George, he's set to be a free agent. I tend to think they'll bring him back. But we'll see. Free agency is about a little less than a month away now. They may allow him to hit the market and, tell him whatever you see out there. If you don't like any of the offers, come on back at our number. But I think he still has value for the Packers. I think he has more value in Green Bay than anywhere else in the league, actually. He's an outstanding coverage guy on special teams. And obviously he knows the system and can fill in at wide receiver if there are injuries. But I don't think they're going to pay big money for the guy, but I think they'd like him back. Love Ty's versatility. Ty Montgomery is an absolute switchblade as an offensive player, and he's going in the last year of his deal. Definitely time for him to step up and make a push for a new contract. Thoughts on Coward saying the Packers window is closed? This is what I'm talking about with the national media. Coward's got to get clicks, and that's why he says things like that. It's patently absurd to say that the Packers championship window is closed. If we keep Janis, hopefully the new staff can teach him to run his routes. It's possible. Why do you think Hundley should be around? He was horrible. Because he's cheap and he knows the offense and he wasn't as bad as you think he is. That's pretty simple. Troy Fumagalli in the draft, the tight end from the Badgers. I like him on day 3. I don't think they should draft him before that. But, you know, he would absolutely be a lunch pail guy that they could plug in, and he would definitely be an asset to the offense. I don't think he's going to be a star, but I think he's going to be a good football player. Let's see. Keep Janis, let Rollins go. Well, TJ, it really depends on what Rollins looks like coming back from that Achilles injury. That's a tough injury to come back from. It's not like he was exactly lighting it up prior to the injury. So, yeah, I would definitely agree that there's a legit possibility that they move on from Rollins. Ezekiel Ansah on the edge. I'll be very surprised if Ansah hits free agency. We'll start to learn tomorrow a few more names of who gets the franchise tag. I suspect the Lions will try to get a deal done there, and if they can't, they'll probably franchise tag him. But yeah, Ansah would be a fine addition. But like I said, I don't see him actually hitting free agency. What about Goodson? Gabe, I know he came back from that ACL injury and then promptly was dealing with a hamstring injury. You know, I know they like him on special teams. I have trouble seeing why. When I watch the tape, I see an undisciplined guy who gets way more special teams flags and penalties than he should. And no, he's not great from scrimmage. So, I mean, I guess, you know, they like his athleticism. That's always been the book on him. He is a great athlete, but it just hasn't translated as a player on the field. Can we sacrifice Brett Hundley to the football gods? That's something to try, I guess, Jimmy. Herb Waters, Matt, I saw Herb posted on his Instagram. He's out there in the sun working on his technique. You know, Joe Witt Jr. loves the guy. I have yet to see it on the field. Obviously, most of everything that Herb has been praising has been happening behind closed doors. I'd love to get a shot and a look at Herb Waters on the field for an extended period of time to make my own determination. But I know Joe Witt Jr. loves the guy at corner. Do you think Fergie should be fined for the national anthem last night? Well, we know Roger Goodell probably would if it was the NFL. Is the new DC better at in-game changes than the last one? Yes. Lions will never go to a Super Bowl. I don't know, man. That's what people were saying about Philadelphia prior to last year. How many beers do you drink after getting asked about Cobb and Nelson over and over and over again? The answer to that question is many. And with that, I'm going to go get said beers. Thanks a lot, everyone. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question. It's amazing how many people come here every day to talk. Can't thank you guys enough. Make sure you're checking PackersNews.com for all the latest. I'll be back tomorrow. Until then, have a good night.